Hey, Bryn. I apologize for my my getting a bit um, aggravated in our discussion. I promise that wasn't like me. I just, anyway, I can't really, there's obviously nothing I can do to excuse it. I just apologize for it. And I hope you'll understand that sometimes we just do things we shouldn't do, and that's what I did. So I apologize for that. So let me go ahead and get into looking at your draft here. So this first draft, you started with this outline to let me know what you plan to do in the introduction. So uh, preamble, keep to 3 lines. Yeah, that's a good idea. So what I would do is this is what we actually call the hook. The first sentence or two is what we call the hook. And there's lots of ways to do an interesting hook to get your audience's attention. I don't personally like when people use a question hook, though I won't say you can't do it. I would suggest maybe try to think of a more creative way than to start with a question. But some good ways to start would be like with a quote from a famous person that's relative to your topic or what you're trying to do with your topic. Um, you could start with a statistic or a little known fact about your topic. You could start with uh, uh, what else? You could start with a definition of a term or uh, a little known surprising fact, like something that people might not realize and be surprised if you stated it. Surprising statement. So lots of ways that you can do hooks, and you can always do a Google search or even I even use Chat GPT or something like that to help you come up with a list of good hooks to use. I just would advise maybe not using a question hook. Um, and then for your body pair for the main body of your introduction, you say is there a significant effect on children's mental or social development when shown televised educational resources? So yeah, you basically would just introduce the topic and tell your audience why it's important. And that probably wouldn't be more than maybe 2 or 3 sentences as well. The introduction really should be pretty short and sweet. Mention sources. Now, you don't really want to mention sources in the introduction. So what you would want to do is in your introduction, you would use the hook, tell your audience a little bit about what your topic is and why it's important, and then end with your thesis statement. And just remember that your thesis statement should be a very solid assertion about something that you believe. And like we did talk about on when we were in our discussion, our conference, um, a great typically a great way and it's a standard way. It's not necessarily a juvenile or just a weak way of doing it. A good way to do an argument thesis statement is to simply state your point, and then give you 3 reasons why that point is true, why you believe that point is true. Now, you do want to make sure you keep yourself out of the report, so you don't want to say I, me, or mine. But you could just simply say something like, um, just using your ideas up here. You can actually just start by saying they're very well. Actually, for the report, you're supposed to start with, according to my instructions on how to do the report. If you go back to the report guidelines, you'll see that the report is actually supposed to start with the words something like, "This report seeks to blank." Right? So this report seeks to investigate the issue of children's mental health or social development and how it's affected by televised educational resources. Something like that would be good, because you're not actually in your report. I'm kind of getting the report when I was thinking there, I was kind of getting the report mixed up with the editorial. So your report is not you proving something. Your report is you simply reporting on something, telling what something is, telling what the two sides are, what they agree on, what they disagree on, and all that, in order to inform yourself and inform your audience. Then you go into the editorial, and that's where you actually make your argument. So that's something that I didn't really even think of when we were talking during our conference, and I didn't quite get that right even with our conference. So your thesis statement should simply start with the words something like, and that it should be at the end of the introduction. Your thesis statement should be something like, this report seeks to understand or seeks to examine or examines the issue of blah blah blah, right? So that's what that should be. And again, the sample is the key, because it shows you what that kind of thing looks like. So just make sure you're using that sample and those guidelines. So this part that you have here, you might incorporate that into your your first section after the introduction, which is the literature review. You might work this into that. And then you would incorporate quotes and such from these sources, right? The study conducted on 5-year-olds. So you want to weave that again. You want to weave that into the writing in your thesis or in your literature review. So again, take a look at the literature review in the sample essay and see how she kind of weaves this information, all the information that's known about the topic, in the literature review. So that's what you'll do with all that stuff. Yeah, you'll discuss the similar conclusions. You'll discuss in the literature review what the for and against are. What people believe in favor of your thesis statement or in favor of your topic. What do some people believe against this? What do they believe about for it? Right. This looks like it's where you will do your like the beginning of your methods section. And remember, you want to use those section headings. So methods would be, you would put methods in bold above this if this is your methods section. But you talk in here about the primary research that was conducted in the form of a survey. You talk about what that survey consisted of. Remember that you want to make sure that you're, and again, this thesis, this is actually not really what I would say. Your thesis statement again needs to be more about what your report is seeking to do, rather than what you have here. I think you could strengthen that thesis by making sure that you say this report seeks to do whatever, right? Because again, it's not about arguing for something or against it. It's about informing your audience of what is known about it, so that they can make up their own mind. Excuse me. All right. So yeah, your methods, you'll talk about the research that you did, and you also want to talk in the methods section about how you found your sources, right? Where you found your sources, how you evaluated those sources, and all that. And again, that's shown in the sample. If you look at the sample, you'll see exactly what I'm talking about, how she does it in the sample. And yeah, you can talk about the questions that you asked. You don't need commas between questions, by the way. Since you've already got a question mark there, that's good enough. You don't need a comma there. So let's see. And then after you're done telling in your method section, all you're doing in the method section is telling your audience what kind of research you did, how you did it, how you evaluated and critiqued your sources, and then how you conducted the actual primary research, and then that's it. You don't want to talk about any of the findings or anything from that, right? It's just what you did. Okay. Then in your results and discussion section, that's obviously where you will talk about what your resources, how your resources, you will talk about what you've discovered in your research for sources and in your primary research. And you will talk about how those two things work together, or maybe they didn't work together so well. So in other words, you're going to talk a little bit about, you're going to start maybe something like by saying something like the sources in the literature review to some degree uh, coordinated well with the findings of the whatever it was you did, whatever you're going to do for your thing. What was it? Was it trying to remember what your, anyway, if it like whatever your second, whatever your primary research was, and whether that be um, what am I trying to say? Polls or surveys, anything like that. Whatever you did in the way of interviews, whatever you did in the way of your primary research, you just want to talk a little bit about how that primary research lined up with your secondary sources. Did they agree? Did they not agree? Things like that, right? You want to talk about that. And so primarily in the findings, you talk about what you actually discovered, and then if you're doing the results and discussion together, then you would basically just provide the results, and then maybe as you provide the results, you would add in the discussion about what they reveal, what you think what those discussion or what those findings, what the results seem to show. Remember, you're not arguing for anything in the report, so you don't want to say that they reveal something for sure. You want to use wording that sounds like, that makes it seem like they are indicative of a possibility or whatever, but not actual, proof or anything. Because you don't want to make the idea is not to influence your audience; it's just to inform them, right? Um, then you'll introduce your graphic properly. You make sure you introduce in before the graphic, somewhere before the graphic comes, you introduce it, right? State something about making a point or something that came from the graphic, and then say something like see figure 1 below. And then you need to give your graphic, you've already got a title here, so underneath the graphic you have to have a proper citation. And again, you can see what that looks like in the sample and in the guidelines. But basically it consists of three things: the figure number, so like figure 1, and then a brief description of what the chart represents, and that's just a single brief sentence, and then the full citation. You would have the words data source, DATA, source, capital S, and then a colon, and then you would put the full citation of the source. Now, if the source is created by you, if the graphic is something you created, then you would put data source, colon, and then you could just put created by author, something like that, referring to yourself, right? And so you'll talk about all that, talk about how those things worked together, how they conflicted if they did. And then your conclusion, you just basically, the conclusion should also be pretty short and sweet. Just tell your audience give your audience a quick reminder of what your purpose was for it and what your findings seem to show. Remember, seem to show, not what they prove, but what they seem to reveal. And then tell your audience what you wanted them to get out of it, right? What you want them to understand at the end. What do you want to leave them with that answers the so what question, so that they don't say, well, why should I care about this? You want to make sure you tell them why the topic is important and why everyone should care about it, right? You can connect back to the thesis. That's a good way to end, or back to something you did in the introduction. Even a great way to end or conclusion is to maybe return to the hook. So, for example, if you started with a hook that was an interesting statistic, then you might end by saying something about that statistic again, or simply saying we need to learn more. We need to all get involved with this in order to change those statistics or make those statistics better or whatever, right? So you refer back to, in some interesting way, you refer back to your introduction, your hook, or whatever. That makes for a very good final statement, final sentence. Now, gaps, that's important. You could talk a little bit about the conclusion. In the conclusion, just touch on what the gaps are and how they affected your overall research. But where you really want to talk about the gaps is you want to talk in the end of your at the end of your literature review. You want to talk about a gap that you feel is present in the known literature. What did they not cover, or what did they maybe not consider, or what did they maybe consider but not well enough, right? What maybe you think they could have done better. So that's the gap in the research that goes in at the end of the lit review. Then you also want to have a potential issue or problem in your own research that you conducted. So if your research again was a poll or a survey, here's what you did. It says it was done with a sample group of 18 to 25-year-olds. So is this something that you did? So you want to make sure, you want to make sure that you clarify that this is a interview rather than some kind of research that was done by somebody else, and you're just using it as a source, because that would still be considered a secondary source. But if you yourself conducted this sample group research, that would be awesome. And you don't want to say I, me, or my, but you could say that it was conducted by this author or something like that, to allude to the fact that you did it. And you want to talk about any weakness that you maybe felt came out of that. So, for example, if you might say that after it was all said and done, you feel like maybe you would like to have had more than 20. Maybe it would have been better to have had 30 or 40, right? That it doesn't have to be a major weakness. It could just be any little thing that you think could be considered a weakness in your research, and then you talk about that. And the reason why you talk about the gap in a research and your weaknesses is it just shows you being fair and honest in your overall research and your overall work, right? So yes, you want to do that. In your works cited page, MLA, you'll have these in alphabetical order, which it looks like they are. You'll start with the words, you'll have the words works cited at the top. Remember, works cited page should start on its own new page. So if your report, let's say your report is 6.5 pages long, you would go down to page 7 to do your works cited page. And you would have works and the word cited just like that, but except the C would be capitalized also, and it would be centered right above the works cited list itself, right? And then your works cited entries, they actually do look good. Your works cited entries look good. So yeah, I always suggest that if you can do so without too much trouble, you try to make sure you fill in the gaps so that your right margin, your entries go over to the right margin as much as possible. So like you might put your cursor here between you and the period and then hit space. And if it works, this little part right here will pop back up here. So however much you think would fill this, just put your cursor there wherever you think it would work, hit the space bar, and then see if it pops back up here. If you do that and it just won't pop back up there, then it's not a big deal. Don't worry about it. But that is something that it really is supposed to be, is all the way to the right margin whenever that's possible. All right. So that's it. That's pretty much it. And I hope this was helpful. I think you're on the right track. It's just a matter of putting it all in the right format, and that, of course, comes from looking at the exemplar. I'm sorry, I'm getting that confused with a different class, a different school actually. They use what we call exemplars. You guys use samples. So use the sample. Let it show you kind of how to weave all this stuff together. And if you have questions or need help with anything, I hope you will forgive me and reach out to me and ask if you need help. Okay. That's what I am here for. And I again apologize for my actions during that conversation in our conference. So, that will do it. And if again, I went ahead and gave you credit, uh, retroactively, I decided to go ahead and give you credit to make up for what happened also. And so, just, let me know if you need anything.